There is a passage in the Bible so strange that for centuries many avoided explaining it, because in only 4 verses something disturbing is mentioned. Beings called the sons of God descended to earth and had children with human women. The result was a mysterious race known as the Nephilim, giants who walked the earth before the flood. But here is the question that few dare to ask. Who were those beings really? And why might their existence have provoked Noah's flood? The forbidden mystery of Genesis 6.
There is such a strange passage in the Bible. It's so disconcerting that for centuries many preachers preferred to avoid explaining it. A passage that appears at the beginning of human history, before the flood, before Noah, before the world was destroyed by water. And in just 4 verses, the Bible mentions something that has baffled theologians, historians, and scholars for thousands of years. Because a disturbing event is described there, a time when called beings the children of God descended to earth, and they had children with human women. The result? A mysterious race known as the Nephilim, giants, heroes of antiquity, renowned men. But the real question is this: who really were the children of God? And even more disturbing, what really were the Nephilim? Because when we carefully analyze what the Bible says, the story becomes much stranger than many imagine.
The strange passage of Genesis. The story appears in Genesis chapter 6, just before the account of the flood. Humanity had multiplied on the earth. The cities were beginning to form. Civilization was growing. But something strange was happening. The text says, "It happened that when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them." Up to here, everything seems normal. But the next verse completely changes the tone. That seeing the sons of God, that the daughters of men were beautiful, they took for themselves women, choosing among all. Here appears the great question. Who are the sons of God? Because the text clearly distinguishes between 2 groups. The sons of God, the daughters of men. They do not seem to be the same type of beings. And the following verse reveals something even more disturbing. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after, when the sons of God joined with the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. The word used here is Nephilim.
The giants of antiquity. The word Nephilim has been translated many times as giants, but its exact meaning is more complex. Some scholars believe it means the fallen. Others believe it means those who make others fall. What we do know is that the text describes these beings as the brave ones, who from ancient times were men of renown. This suggests something important. They were not simple people. They were extraordinary individuals, legendary warriors, powerful figures that marked the history of ancient civilizations. In fact, many cultures of the world have myths about giants or demigods. The Greeks spoke of the Titans. The Sumerians mentioned the Apkallu. The Norse legends speak of the Jotun. And many ancient traditions describe a time when giant beings walked the earth. Could a connection exist? Some researchers believe so. But to really understand this mystery, we have to go back to the main question. Who were the sons of God? There are several theories, and each one completely changes the interpretation of the story. The first theory says that the sons of God were simply descendants of Seth, the son of Adam. According to this idea, the descendants of Seth mixed with the descendants of Cain. But this explanation has problems, because in the Old Testament, the expression sons of God appears elsewhere, and it almost always refers to celestial beings. For example, in the book of Job, there it describes a scene in the sky. The text says, "One day the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and among them appears someone unexpected, Satan." This suggests that the sons of God mentioned in that context were not human. They were spiritual beings, celestial beings, which leads to a much more disturbing theory.
The theory of the fallen angels. Many ancient scholars, including Jewish writers from more than 2,000 years ago, believed that the sons of God were actually fallen angels, celestial beings who rebelled, beings who abandoned their position and descended to earth. According to this interpretation, these angels not only rebelled against God, but they directly interfered with humanity. They took human wives, and from that union were born the Nephilim, a hybrid race, part human, part something else. And according to some ancient texts, their existence was one of the reasons why God decided to send the flood. But this is where the story gets even darker, because there are ancient texts that describe what these fallen angels exactly did on Earth, and what they taught humanity. It changed the world forever. The angels that brought forbidden knowledge. The Bible mentions the Nephilim only briefly, but there is an ancient Jewish text that expands the story in a surprising way. A book known as the Book of Enoch. This text was written more than 2,000 years ago, and although it is not part of most modern Bibles, it was extremely influential in the ancient world. In fact, something that few people know is that the New Testament directly quotes the Book of Enoch. In the letter of Jude, a prophecy attributed to Enoch is mentioned. This has led many scholars to consider that the book contains very old traditions. And in that text, a disturbing story appears. The story of 200 angels called the Watchers. The Watchers. According to the Book of Enoch, these angels had a mission. Observe humanity, guide it. But something happened. The text describes that a group of these angels began to look at human women, and they were fascinated. Their leader was an angel named Semihasa, and one day they made a decision that would change the history of the world. They would descend to Earth, but they knew that what they were about to do was a rebellion. So they made an oath, a pact among themselves. The text describes that they descended on Mount Hermon, a mountain that today is on the border between Israel, Syria, and Lebanon. And it was there where it all began.
The Forbidden Union. According to the account, these angels took human wives, and from those unions were born the Nephilim. Giants, huge beings. The text says that their size was so great that they consumed everything that humans produced. And when food began to run out, the Nephilim began to devour animals, then humans. Violence began to spread throughout the earth. But that was not the only thing the Watchers did, because according to the Book of Enoch, these angels began to teach knowledge that humanity had never had before. And here is where the story becomes even more disturbing. The forbidden knowledge. One of the angels, called Azazel, taught humans something very specific. He taught them to manufacture weapons of war, swords, knives, shields, armor. For the first time, humanity was learning to create tools designed specifically to kill. But other angels taught different things. Some taught astrology, others taught sorcery and enchantments, others taught the use of metals and jewels. It is even said that they taught women cosmetics and ornaments, changing the way people saw themselves. In a short time, humanity had acquired knowledge that it did not possess before. Technologies, secrets, power, but the result was devastating. Violence increased, corruption spread. The world began to fill with chaos.
The clamor of humanity. According to the ancient text, human suffering began to grow so much that the cries of humanity reached the sky. Then, 4 archangels observed what was happening. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. They saw how the Watchers had corrupted the earth, how the Nephilim were destroying everything, how humanity was being dragged into chaos. And they brought the matter before God. The answer was clear. The world had to be purified. But before that happened, the Watchers had to be punished. And what happened next is one of the most dramatic scenes described in the ancient texts. Because according to the story, God ordered the archangels to descend to earth to confront the rebellious angels.
The destiny of the Watchers. The archangel Raphael received a specific mission: capture Azazel, chain him up, and lock him up in a dark place in the desert, a place where he would remain imprisoned until the day of judgment. Gabriel received another mission: destroy the Nephilim. According to the account, he caused the giants to confront each other in a brutal war, and Michael received the final order: to chain the other Watchers, to bury them in the depths of the earth, where they would remain prisoners for thousands of years, awaiting the final judgment. But even after the giants disappeared, something of them remained in the world, something that, according to some ancient interpretations, still influences humanity. And that is one of the most disturbing mysteries of all.
The flood and the mystery that still remains after the rebellion of the Watchers and after the appearance of the stave. Nephilim. The earth had completely changed. Violence had spread everywhere, Corruption had become normal. The book of Genesis describes that moment with disturbing words. It says, "And the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." The whole world was corrupted. But the problem was not only human evil. According to ancient interpretations, humanity itself had been altered. The mixture between humans and those celestial beings had created something that should never have existed, something that distorted the order of creation. And then, God made a decision that would change the history of the world forever. The man who found grace. In the midst of a world full of corruption, there was a different man. His name was Noah. The Bible says something very interesting about him. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, but the text adds another phrase that many overlook. It says that Noah was perfect in his generations. Some scholars believe that this phrase means that his lineage had not been corrupted. In other words, Noah represented a humanity that still remained pure. That's why God gave him a mission: build an ark, a huge vessel designed to survive a global catastrophe. For years, Noah built the ark, while the rest of the world continued living as always, without imagining what was to come: the judgment of the flood. Then, the day arrived. The sky darkened. The rains began to fall. But it wasn't just rain. The Bible says that the fountains of the great deep also opened. The waters began to cover the earth. The rivers overflowed. The seas grew. The mountains began to disappear under the water. For 40 days and 40 nights, the world was covered by the flood. Entire civilizations disappeared. Cities, cultures, ancient empires. Everything was buried underwater. According to this ancient interpretation, the flood was not just a punishment. It was a purification of the world, a way to erase the corruption that had invaded creation. The Nephilim disappeared. The giants no longer walked the earth. The Watchers remained chained, and humanity began again. But this is where a disturbing question arises: the mystery that appears later. Because in the book of Numbers, many years after the flood, a surprising phrase appears. The explorers that Moses sent to the Promised Land returned with a terrifying report. They said, "We also saw giants there, the sons of Anak, and we were like locusts in front of them." Giants, after the flood. How was it possible? If the Nephilim had disappeared, why does the Bible mention giants again? Some believe that it is simply very tall men, but other biblical researchers believe that there could be more to the story. Because throughout the Old Testament, several peoples described as giants appear. The Anakim, the Rephaim, the Amim, even one of the most famous enemies of the Bible, Goliath, a Philistine warrior described as a giant, an echo of the past. Some scholars believe that these stories could be simply ancient exaggerations, but others believe that they could be echoes of something much older, distant memories of a time before the flood. Stories passed down through generations. Stories about beings that once walked the earth. Whatever the explanation, the story of the Watchers and the Nephilim remains one of the most fascinating mysteries of the Bible. A story that mixes history, prophecy, and questions that are still open today. Because when we read these ancient texts, we realize something surprising. The Bible doesn't always answer all the questions. Sometimes, it only shows us a fragment of a much larger story. A story full of secrets. Secrets that have remained hidden for thousands of years. And perhaps, just perhaps, we still don't know the whole truth. Close for the video. Now the question is for you. Do you think the Nephilim were real? Or do you think these stories are just ancient symbols? Leave your opinion in the comments. And if you want to discover more hidden mysteries in the Bible, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Because in the next video, we are going to explore another of the most disturbing secrets of the scriptures. One that could completely change the way we understand ancient history.